Welcome back, beautiful and amazing human beings. This is Rudkowski of WeAreChange.org, and I am utterly exhausted. Literally just drove from Cherán, Mexico to Mexico City, a 5-hour drive. Got there at 3 o'clock in the morning, left at 6 o'clock in the morning, got here tired and exhausted. But of course, the breaking news does not wait for anyone, as we're getting incredible news right now that the ex-Trump lawyer, Michael Cohen, in court just struck a plea deal and pled guilty to 8 charges, including payoffs and campaign contributions, which he says he acted at the direction of the candidate, Donald Trump, with the intention of influencing the election. Also at the same time, Paul Manafort, the president's former campaign chairman, was found guilty on 8 of 18 charges, including felonies of tax evasions, bank fraud, and failing to file foreign bank accounts. So, with all of this happening, the bigger question, of course, is asked: how will this affect Donald Trump, and will it actually bring him down? And to talk about this, plus a lot more, we have Will Chamberlain, who's a conservative commentator and a lawyer. And Will, I was going to say our residential legal expert, but we actually have no association at all. And we disagree politically on a lot of issues. I kind of am more anarchistic. Will, you're kind of more right-leaning, but I do find you very level-headed. You've been following this case. Your fingers are right on the pulse of it. And I just wanted to ask you, what does this news mean? What just happened?
So what happened is that Paul Manafort got convicted of 8 counts of mostly tax evasion. I think there's also a bank fraud count in there, mostly for his actions in the Ukraine. He was a consultant and a high-level political operative in the Ukraine, had received massive payments from the Ukrainian government, stashed them in foreign bank accounts that he didn't report to the IRS. That's tax evasion. And he was convicted of those counts. He was charged with 18 counts, only convicted of 8, and the jury hung on the other 10 counts, meaning that they just couldn't come to a unanimous verdict. In the Cohen case, Michael Cohen just pled guilty in the Southern District of New York, also to 8 counts. 6 of them were related to tax evasion himself. From 2012 to 2016, Cohen apparently omitted to include about $4 million of income on his taxes that he was earning from taxi medallions in Chicago. But then on the final 2 counts Cohen pled to, those were related to a payment to Stormy Daniels of about $130,000. And Cohen admitted to an excessive campaign contribution, also causing an unlawful corporate campaign contribution, and in the process of doing so said he was directed by a political candidate, pretty obviously Trump.
Now, obviously, Manafort and Cohen are both trending on Twitter. A lot of people are making this up as this really huge, major deal that will affect the presidency of Donald Trump. People are talking about impeachment. People are talking about this bringing down Donald Trump. What is your analysis from all the news that's coming in right now from this breaking news and its effects on Donald Trump?
So none of it has anything to do with Russia. That's the first point to make, right? Manafort's behavior was all about his own behavior prior to ever being involved in the Trump campaign in 2016. And that had nothing to do with Russia. Cohen's was dealing with his own personal tax evasion, as well as the Stormy Daniels payment. None of it had anything to do with Russia. So I think for the purposes of the grand Russian collusion narrative, this doesn't further. In terms of actual impeachment, I think what this does do, especially the Cohen plea, is it does remove all doubt that if the Democrats take the House back, that Trump will be impeached by the House, because the Democrats now at least have a facially plausible reason to impeach Trump, right? Trump isn't going to be indicted in the Southern District alongside Michael Cohen, but Democrats can now point to Michael Cohen's plea and say, look, Michael Cohen pled guilty to a crime, essentially a federal campaign crime, and said that Trump directed him. And that's, I think, enough for a very angry Democratic Party to say that's a high crime, we're impeaching you. So that I think that basically shuts down any possibility that the Democrats will not impeach Trump if they retake the House in November.
Yeah, it's going to be a very contested election and a very important one, but also a local one that not that many people participate in inside of the United States, which is an important caveat to note here with the elections coming right up very soon when many people not even being registered. But from the entire case that I'm looking at, I'm like, tax evasion, sleeping with a porn star. I mean, that sounds like baby stuff that happens in Washington, D.C. compared to all the other bigger crimes and all the bigger things that are happening there, with this primarily being pushed as the Russia investigation. But is there anything solid and legitimate here other than, just tax evasion and Stormy Daniels, which honestly just seems trivial with the criminal behavior that we see in Washington, D.C. with the bureaucrats happening every day?
I mean, that's it. I wouldn't actually say the tax evasion itself is trivial. I mean, it's pretty big tax evasion, right? $4 million over a period of 5 years by Cohen, not reporting foreign bank accounts. Like, I think even if you weren't Michael Cohen or Paul Manafort and you did that over a long enough period of time, the IRS would catch up with you and be very, very angry. So those aspects aren't trivial, but they also have nothing to do with Trump, right? Those are aspects that have each of Cohen and Manafort's personal affairs were not in order at all. And to the extent that speaks to Trump, it really just speaks to poor hiring more than it does to any wrongdoing on his part. As for the one part that could involve Trump, which is the Stormy Daniels payment, I mean, as a framing matter, it really is, it's hard to see how this should be a crime. He was the victim of blackmail, right? He was making a payment to somebody who was going to reveal information about him. That's blackmail. And I don't think that the Republican base will stand for its own representatives voting to impeach Trump on the basis of him having been the victim of blackmail. And more the idea that this could be a high crime. I was just watching Scott Adams who was talking about, does this sound like a high crime to you? And it really doesn't to me. I mean, this sounds piddling, especially in comparison. Go back to Bill Clinton, right? Bill Clinton perjured himself. He lied under oath. He was a lawyer and he lied under oath. And he was not impeached. If you don't think Bill Clinton should have been impeached for perjury, I don't see how you could possibly think Donald Trump should be impeached for being the victim of blackmail.
With the political fervor that's happening right now, I think anything is possible because the whole landscape is so unpredictable. But with the point that I was making before, I mean, if you look at the Panama Papers, if you look at Al Sharpton or John Edwards and all these other politicians who didn't pay taxes before themselves, or, I mean, the whole tax issue to me is just an issue of, legalities, because you look at institutions like the Clinton Global Initiative, you look at the charities supposedly that people set up, the other organizations, it's just a matter of filling paper out. Definitely, there were a lot of mistakes made, but I think that those mistakes are more common than we think, especially among the political elite in Washington, D.C. But there are some kind of hypocrisies in this specific case. A lot of people bring up the fact that Manafort was working with the Podesta group when it came to the effective lobbying that they did in Ukraine. What are some of the kind of hypocrisies that you see in these entire cases?
Well, I think the Sharpton example is very good, right? Al Sharpton clearly evaded taxes and didn't go to jail for it. Charlie Rangel, another good example, a longtime New York Democratic representative. And it's interesting how it seems that Democrats get away with this stuff, but Republicans don't. The Podesta issue has more to do with the FARA trial that's coming up soon. That wasn't because there's, Manafort was both charged with tax evasion in Virginia, but he's also facing a trial in D.C. for violating the Foreign Agent Registration Act. There's a lot of hypocrisy there because there's been a lot of FARA violations in the past, and there's only been like one conviction in 70 years, even though many people have failed to register with FARA, even though they were foreign agents. So it's a little ridiculous for him to be charged there. But I think, the underlying understanding here is that the Mueller team is going after Trump hard. They want to get Trump. They want to get a report on Trump that makes it possible to impeach him. I mean, it's a staff of 17 Democrats, many of whom people like Andrew Weissman, who were involved in the Enron case and who had much of their work overturned by the Supreme Court as, very malicious prosecution. These are all Democratic donors as well. These are people who want Trump gone. And so from their perspective, Podesta doesn't help them in terms of getting Trump out, but putting Manafort under pressure might. And so I think that's what explains a lot of it. But if you're expecting hypocrisy, you're going to get it, right? The deep state hates Trump with a passion. And if it means charging him and people around him with things they haven't charged other people with, so be it.
My dad always said if you want to hit a dog, you'll always find a stick, and this definitely seems like one of those kind of situations. And I am not a Trump fan, but ever since the whole Russiagate investigation came out, we were saying this is just fake news. Now, I kind of believe in different things than you do. I don't believe it's him versus the deep state as much as it is the political establishment left versus the political establishment right, and the fighting that's happening between them now. But Will, very important question. What about Q? I thought Q had a plan for all this.
Well, I actually posted as Q recently saying Paul Manafort was going to be convicted of tax evasion. That was 2 weeks ago. You can look it up. So this is a belated revelation that I am, in fact, Q. With that said, it wasn't. It's funny that Q wouldn't predict this because this was actually really easy to predict. If you had been following the news about the Manafort case, it was pretty clear that he had both made a lot of money from shady sources in Ukraine and hadn't reported it on his taxes. And it doesn't take a lot to put two and two together to figure out that he was going to be found guilty of tax evasion, most likely. And that actually makes sense in this case, right? There were 18 counts. And, a lot of them were pretty complicated fraud counts that kind of required looking at Manafort's intent. But these are really simple things, right? You made money, you didn't report it on your taxes, that's a crime. Like, this stuff was pretty straightforward and simple. So I think that the jury probably didn't have much trouble with these counts. And surprising that Q would have had trouble.
Yeah. Very, very good point. As you know, we haven't been really been following the Q or fans of Q, been very critical of them since they came out. But Will, thank you for your analysis. People could definitely find you on Twitter at Will Chamberlain. We're going to link your Twitter account in the description below. Thank you so much for your commentary. Thank you so much for being on this show. And thank you guys for watching and supporting real independent media. Stay tuned for a lot more here on youtube.com/WeAreChange.